Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Spiritually Speaking. I am Dee, and today I have with me Kyle, who is multi-talented. Hello, Kyle, and thank you for being with me today. I appreciate you coming on as my guest.
Hi to you as well. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So you do some quite fascinating things. We were talking about some of the various aspects of your life and how you feel like everything is spiritual that you do. So I would love for you to tell us a lot more about that.
First and foremost, I'm a holistic iridologist. I also live on a small homestead that we raise pastured poultry on for meat and eggs. I'm a men's coach and a sobriety mentor. And yes, absolutely, spirituality is involved in all those things. I feel very fortunate to be able to do all those things and be able to connect myself to the earth, to God, to all those things through that by helping other people. And almost all of it is based on my lived experiences. That's my most prized credential, I guess you could say. I did go to school and am a diplomate of holistic iridology, but other than that, everything else is based on things that I've experienced in life. Um, the troubles and tribulations of going through all these things that I try to help people have a smoother passing through than I did. And people still have to go through their own experiences and learn that in their own way, but there are some tools that can be handed off to make it a little bit easier. And that's basically what I try to provide through my services.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that so much. So, how did you get interested in iridology specifically? I know you do some other things as well, but that is what I think caught my interest the most when I came across your post and asked you to be a guest. So, what drew you to that?
Well, I think it's about 25 years ago now. Uh, I remember people in my community. I grew up in a small town in Kentucky, and I remember people referring to this guy that was an eye doctor, they were calling him, and they were calling him the Amish doctor and all these things. And they were saying he looks in your eyes and he tells you all this very interesting stuff. And it's weird how he knows and all this stuff just by looking in your eyes. And I immediately was just drawn to whatever that was. And so this guy he was an Amish guy. And so you literally have to write him a letter and mail it, and then you get a letter back letting you know when your appointment is. Now, I found out later that you can just show up, but you may be standing in line or sitting in a waiting room for hours, possibly even all day, depending on how busy he is. Um, but anyway, I go and he's got this mystical look of like a wizard. I mean, he's Amish. He's got a gray beard that goes all the way down to his waist. And he takes a light and lens and he looks in your eyes and basically reveals some of your weaknesses that show up. And I don't know, I was just really so drawn to that. And he literally would hand you an index card and you would go into the other room where these other Amish ladies were, and they would tell you what herbs best suited you based on what he'd written on the index card. And so and his name was Reuben Schwartz. I almost forgot to mention his name. And I think he's retired now, but he has two sons that carry on his practice still in Kentucky. And so I ended up going to one of his seminars. He put on like a day long seminar and basically taught us this version of the small, I call it the small black book that was written by Bernard Jensen. And he gives you the basic information on iridology and he tells you some of his experiences with it. And over the next decade at least, I was just what I call a hobby iridologist. I would occasionally look in people's eyes, friends and family. Didn't really go deeper in the study of it, but it just stayed with me for years. And then I think it was in 2013, 2014, I found out about Dr. David J. Pezic and the International College of Iridology and realized that there was this whole world where you could actually learn a lot and go much further beyond where Reuben Schwartz was at the time, because we're talking about cameras, monitors, being able to blow an iris up on a big computer screen and do a really deep analysis. And I was just like, wow, I really need to look into that. And so I have a conversation with Dr. Pezic about it, and I end up going to school for it and actually getting certified and becoming a diplomate of iridology. Um, and I have to mention that, it's a little emotional even speaking about that because we lost Dr. Pezic just a couple weeks ago.
Oh, I'm
And
so
I was
sorry.
actually looking through some of my notes, and I was saying that he is, one of the most prominent figure in iridology alive today. And I was like, I've got to change that paragraph now. So he meant a lot to me. He shook me and drove me to become way better than what I was thinking I was as a hobby iridologist. And I had to do a lot of unlearning and a lot of learning, and have just came a long way through him. So I just want to make sure I give praise to him and appreciation for all he's done for me in the world of iridology in general. He made a lot of advancements to it from the blessings of Bernard Jensen, who was kind of considered the modern father of iridology. And yeah, I was fortunate enough to get to learn all that from him, and I actually have a relationship with him. So I'm really blessed for that. But yeah, and so I sit here today and I have the Pezic Iris Cam Multiflex that he designed. Pezic was also a photographer since the age of 13.
Wow.
Some of the changes that he made to iridology were the brain area, and that's based on 40 years of psychiatry. He was also a psychiatrist and analyzing over 7,000 pairs of eyes. And so, yeah, I sit here today and I have the camera, I have the practice, and I do all the things that he's taught me through holistic iridology. And yeah, that's just my path. I think I covered it all, and now I see clients can do it long distance. I see them in person. I go to health fairs in the Pacific Northwest pretty regularly, and we have a practice in our small town at the Collective here in Amboy, Washington. So yeah.
That sounds incredible. And it's so funny we're like intuitively tuning into my question because I was going to ask you if it's something that you can do remotely or if you have to have someone sitting in front of you.
Yeah, I always prefer to be able to do things in person and use my camera to get the best quality pictures that I can. But yeah, I do have instructions for people to do the best photos possible with their cell phones that I email people. And then if you send me back a few pictures of each eye, and if I feel like I can work with them, then I do the whole analysis long distance, and people can send me that from anywhere. I've even had at least two people now go to these kiosks in malls. There's a lot of people taking iris photos where they kind of like doctor it up and make it look like a nice piece of artwork and stuff. And
Mhm.
I've had people send me pictures from those as well that are pretty good. So yeah, it's definitely possible to do long distance.
That's so cool. I love that. What kind of things does iridology uncover for the person who's being read?
Well, so you come into this world. It's basically your roadmap in your iris, and so it reveals all your strengths and weaknesses that you were predisposed with when you got here. And the iris chart covers everything. So every organ and gland is connected through the eyes. Like you literally think of them as like the eyes are the monitor to your computer. So everything else is just an extension from there. And so it literally can tell your overall constitution of just how strong and you are overall. There's the glands and organs, the colon, the stomach area, the brain area. Everything can be read through iris analysis.
That's amazing. What's the coolest thing you've ever read?
Probably my own iris report from Dr. Pesic, and then still using it as this. It's my study guide basically. I still have it. I have it printed out, and I refer to it all the time. And it's like, well, what did it say about me in this situation? And so, seeing your own eyes uh, is probably the coolest thing. Um, but every single iris is a unique experience every time I do it. They're more unique than our fingerprints. There's no two alike in the world. Even identical twins are going to have different irises, and so it's just really cool to know that yes, there are certain predispositions that are in blue eyes, hazel eyes, brown eyes
Hmm.
most of the time, but they're all different at the end of the day, and you start from scratch on everyone. There's never a time where I'm like, oh, I just looked at this eye 3 months ago. Let me see what I told them. It just doesn't work that way. It's different every single time. So yeah.
So, meaning that if you read, like, say, my eyes this week, and I asked you 6 months down the road to read me again, you would get a different reading?
No, not like that. That's very rare and would take way longer than 6 months to see any kind of difference. The only time I think that you can truly see a difference like that in the same person is maybe a childhood iris analysis versus an adult, like 20 years.
Hmm.
Um, but some people can have a level of toxicity so high that yeah, you could probably see a difference in 6 months to a year if they were really on like drugs and alcohol.
Hmm.
Um, were really sick, definitely in the sclera, the white part of the eye. You can see differences in that pretty quickly if someone heals from a lot of toxicity. But for the most part, this is a predisposition. It is your roadmap. It's what you came into the world with. A lot of people, and I'm not saying people aren't telling the truth, but a lot of people claim that their eyes change color pretty regularly. And I don't know if that's true or not. It's not true for me, but most likely it has to do with the lighting or the clothes they're wearing or the wallpaper color or paint around them and stuff. And it does look like they change. Um, but yeah, a lot of people claim they have green eyes one day and blue the next. And I'm like, well, maybe, I don't know. But for the most part, it's just the environment you're in that kind of makes it look that way.
Yeah, kind of like the water reflects the sky and makes the water look different colors on different days.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. What's the most surprising thing you found out about yourself by having your own irises read? If you want to
Hmm.
share.
No, I don't mind sharing it all. I take my report with me all the time in case people are like, have you ever done it? What did yours say? And I would let people read it from beginning to end. Um, I don't think there was a whole lot that was surprising other than it was just a confirmation of what we already are taught and we've learned with iridology over the years is that the truth is in there, that the eyes don't lie. And so, there was a lot of things significant. In 2014, I was already 35 years old, something like that. And so I'd already lived a life and experienced some things. And so one of the big things that showed up in mine was fear and self-esteem issues on the left in the left eye. And so that's a feminine energy. And so I do have that lived experience of having that kind of instilled in me through my mother and knowing how she came up as well. That was a big thing for both of us. And not to just shift gears immediately, but this does go back as far as many as 62 ancestors make up what is in our iris. And so
Wow.
I know on that side that it goes back to my mother and at least my grandmother. And it can go back as far as your great, so three greats. But I don't know the history beyond that. But at least seeing that and knowing that it was in the left eye, not in the right. There was a little bit of the self-esteem issues in the right, but it was very significant, associated with like kidneys and adrenals with fear and the self-esteem area of my brain. It's just like, yeah, all that was true. And I'm like, and it really was revealed through my eyes. And it's a predisposition that I had. It was
Hmm.
something I was going to have to face no matter what. And so, yeah, not surprising, but oh wow, this really is true. When I see it in other people's eyes, and now I see it in mine. So it was just the confirmation wasn't surprising, but that's the most significant thing that I've seen is just looking at my own and seeing my own story there.
Yeah, that's very specific. So it's extremely accurate, it sounds like, which is fascinating. I mean, you always hear about the eyes being the window to the soul, but I've heard of iridology before, but I've never talked to anyone or explored it to any extent at all. So I'm absolutely fascinated with the accuracy that it can pinpoint fear and self-esteem. I mean, like I would have never thought that you would have seen that in an eye, you know? And then to be more
Yes.
specific of which side of the body it manifests itself on, being associated with either the female or male energy. That's very interesting.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that Dr. Pezic really drove home with all of us is that always start with the thoughts and emotions. Like, a lot of old iridology and um, it was all just the physical. So
Hmm.
when you're looking at the adrenals and kidneys, we're just like, oh, you just have you have a weak kidney. It's like, no, not necessarily. You're predisposed to have a weak kidney or adrenal, and if you don't process things like forgiveness or face your fears and overcome them, it's going to manifest into a physical ailment later in your body because you are predisposed for a weakness in this area. A big one for me as well is the orange pigment that shows up in the eye that is associated with the pancreas and grief. Um, that's a big one that I try to drive home in my men's work is that we've got to start processing our grief in a healthy way and stop suppressing it. You want to have pancreas challenges as a man, then you just keep burying and suppressing that grief deep down in your stomach in the pit, where so many of us do, and you're going to have pancreas issues. And that's probably even if you don't have a weakness for it. But if
Mm,
it shows up in the eye already that you're predisposed for a weaker area, you've got to process these things, and it is normal. We've got to normalize facing fears, forgiving ourselves, forgiving other people, processing grief when it comes up, no matter what it is.
yeah.
Like the weakness factor that we have of like, oh, you don't need to cry, it's a sign of weakness. I've had to let go of that, and I was absolutely the type of person that would not show it. Um, I literally believed it growing up as a kid and as a teenager so much that I wouldn't even do it by myself, where if no
Wow.
one could see me. I literally believed that it was going to make me weaker. Um, so and it took me, 40 years to come out of that. And when I did, the floodgates opened, and because it was still there, all the things that had happened over the years. And so I literally took the time a little over a year ago when my dog died to grieve that because it hurt. And,
Yes.
15 years ago, I was just like, I would never let anybody know that I'm crying over a dog. And this time I didn't care. And
Yeah.
it happened over and over again for like 2 weeks. And then 6 months after he was gone, there's some kind of reminder that comes up, and I'm just like, I let it go again. And it's like, it feels so much better to do that. And, I'm a believer that some of the things that we hate or despise about other people are things that we don't like facing in ourselves. So anyone that is like, oh, look at you over there crying, you big baby, it's probably that they're just uncomfortable because they wish they could let it out.
Right.
Yeah.
It does
So,
tend to make other people really uncomfortable. And I used to be concerned about that myself. And now I just carry Kleenex and I just cry because you know what? We get to feel our emotions. If we're happy, then we get to be happy. And if those tears of happiness come, then that's cool. And if we're sad, and it doesn't matter where, like grief doesn't show up at the most opportune moments when like you're in the shower by yourself. Sometimes it happens when you're in the grocery store or you're out with friends or whatever. You see something like you said that's a reminder, and it makes you sad. It can make you happy just as easily, those memories, but sometimes it makes you sad. And I feel like you're right. We need to make it widely accepted that we get to experience those because we all have them. It's not like it's one isolated individual who has these crazy emotions happening. It's all of us. We all experience grief. We all experience sadness and joy and all of the things. So I think that's very important. I say carry
Yeah,
Kleenex.
yeah, everybody is holding on to something more than ever. Excuse me, more than ever now, and it's because we're receiving more information than ever now, and it's not all good information. You
That's
know, we all spend too much time on the internet, television, radio, whatever it is, and when you spend that much time perceiving all this stuff, we're not designed to hold all the information that we try to hold these days. Our bodies just can't take it. And most of that stuff that's being fed to us is not good.
right.
And we're seeing things that make us want to grieve, that make us sad, that make us depressed. And if we're taking in too much and we're in a belief state that we can't grieve or let this stuff out,
Yeah.
it almost feels overwhelming. Just the weight of the world when we talk about that, it's really heavy, and it's
Hmm.
not necessarily because things are so different in general. It's just we as individuals are taking in something that's very different that hasn't existed but what 20 years at this point, that
Right.
we're able to see and receive all this information that is bad all over the world.
Yeah.
You know, our ancestors didn't grow up knowing what was going on the other side of the planet.
Right.
And it's not that we should turn our backs on it or ignore it, but be aware that we're not really designed to hold all this.
Yeah. Yeah, we're
You,
not at all. And one of the things I say to people, because I feel like it's so important, is, send love and light to the situation. Send positive. It doesn't mean that you aren't aware, like the fires in California and things like that. Yes, it's a tragedy, but if we focus only on that and we don't send love and light to the people who were affected by it, then we're not only doing ourselves a disservice, but we're doing those people a disservice also, because it's like a prayer, for those people. If you send that positive energy out there to them, and that shifts things. It sounds like it's such a, mundane, you know, thing to do, but it's not. It's so powerful.
yeah. And when you were talking about, the grocery store and things just coming up unexpectedly, it's like the best thing any of us can do if we ever see that and they look like they're alone or something. You don't have to get involved, but if you feel comfortable, just simply ask them, do you need any support right now?
Yeah.
And if they say no, walk away. But if they say yes, just be there, be present, and let them know that there is someone that's at least not going to make fun of you for crying right now. You don't have
Yes.
to do anything but put a hand on their back and just stand there.
Yeah.
And there's a part of me too that I like. I'm not happy that people are hurting, but there is a now, because of my own experience with it, a happiness that comes over me when I see someone cry,
Hmm.
especially if it's a man. I'm like, I'm not happy that you're hurting. I'm happy that you're not holding on to it. And
That's
that
right.
wherever we're at this moment, that you are willing to do that instead of burying it. Cause man, it's, yeah, I've already went into it. If it's just too much to hold on to these days, no matter what it is. The littlest thing, if it hurts, let it hurt, let it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, let it out for sure. One of the things I like to say is that there's strength and softness, because we get so caught up in our weird definition of strength that we've been taught and programmed to believe all of these years, especially with men. Like you said, it's big boys don't cry, and man up and cowboy up, and all of these terms that mean that it's not okay for a man to be soft and have feelings and express those. And I feel like it's really important. I feel like it's a really big sign of strength when a man can be comfortable in his feelings.
Yeah. And and the worst thing we can tell the boys is stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Like that's still a thing. And that's the programming that'll stay with them forever. Is
Yeah.
that, well, this, whatever this is I'm feeling right now is not bad enough and I should stop crying.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And my message to men all the time is that if you think that you're somehow making yourself stronger by holding on to it, you have no idea what kind of strength you feel when you put it down.
Yeah.
You're carrying something on your shoulders that is unnecessary and making you weaker. And when
Yes.
you release it, you become stronger. It's literally the opposite of what our belief is in it.
That's right. It is. And people will self-medicate and turn to things that aren't healthy alternatives to deal with those emotions that they feel because they're not processing them in a healthy way.
Yeah, I absolutely did it myself with alcohol for 25 years. It was one of the main uses for it was to suppress who I was and what I was feeling and not have to tap into any of that grief. And
Yeah.
that's part of what I was talking about when the floodgates opened when I finally did it. Like when I put down the bottle in 2020, there was nowhere else for it to go. You know, I couldn't put it in the glass or in the bottle anymore, and so it came rolling out. And yeah, you talk about suppressing, boy. I definitely became an expert in that for sure. And
Yeah.
it was so freaking heavy that I couldn't carry it anymore.
Yeah. And didn't you feel liberated? I mean, like that's the word that just popped into my brain when we are able to process these things and leave those unhealthy coping mechanisms behind, that there's a feeling of liberation and lightness. So is that something that you experienced as well?
Oh yeah, over and over again. Uh, like I said, the weight on your shoulders, chains breaking, all of it. It's literally a prison that we don't have any idea we're in until we're able to step out of it.
Yeah. That's a great word, prison. And we do create that for ourselves a lot. So I'm more interested as we're talking more about how you work with men and that type of thing. What other things do you do with men to help them, manage their emotions and set themselves free?
Well, I actually just keep it as simple as possible, and then things can lead in many different directions when you start talking, but that is just the main thing is to just sit and talk and provide space to let people know that it's okay, whether it's men or women, that it's okay and it's safe to talk about this.
Yeah.
I've got a good friend that says he appreciates the space because he knows what he says here is not going to beat him home. Like it's not going to be known in the community. Your wife's
Right.
not going to hear it through the chain before you even get home, type thing. And so that's the main thing, that it's you. There's a space being provided uh, in the men's work world that is not bar talk. It's not locker room talk. It's sit down and let's talk about the things that you've been holding on to for 20 years, the things that hurt, to be able to talk about how uncomfortable you are in your current relationship or a past relationship, or how you were treated by your mother or father or an uncle or a grandparent,
Mhm.
things that you've just held on to that you don't think that you think is going to make you weak if you reveal that it bothered you or it hurt you.
Yeah.
And it really is that simple, just the space to be able to let it go. And sometimes it's like I said, I was 40. For the first time in your life, you're able to talk about something that has really bothered you, that's made you sad, that's hurting. And it's really that simple. And like I said, it can go many different directions after that, but just providing the space, and it's safe to talk about this right now, and it's not going to beat you home.
Yeah. And that's a really big deal. And I do believe that's why a lot of, especially men, don't talk about things that they really need to be able to talk about, is because they're afraid that it's going to somehow get out and it's going to make them look bad or whatever.
Yeah. And little do they know that, there's a strong chance that they end up like me and they end up sharing it with everyone anyway.
So how was that for you when you started sharing things with the world and getting your voice heard and your story out there? What was that like for you?
Well, I guess it's part of the healing process as well. Like that's the medicine too of when you get in circle or in a group setting, whether it's a 12 step program or a men's retreat or something like that. Um, you start feeding off each other. You know, one man's message is another man's medicine, and back and forth it goes, and
Yeah.
you feed each other. And so that made me feel like, I don't have to just do it in these circles. I don't really know why I feel so comfortable sharing the details of things that I've been through, as long as it doesn't hurt or reveal someone else's story. I don't mind sharing anything that I've been through. I talk about, my divorce that happened. I talk about my sobriety and how that took place through that. I talk about, like I said earlier, I reveal my entire Irish report that was done on me for people to see. Um, and it's not required by anyone. That's not the only way to heal, but it does help me heal too, to share my story and get it out there. And it is another part of the releasing of the grief and the pain of being like, hey, this is what I've been through. There's details that I leave out just because, like I said, there's things that involve other people that it could hurt them, and I don't have their permission to share it. And so, but for the most part, anything that I can talk about that's my lived experiences that I feel like can help just one person, I'm always comfortable sharing it.
Yeah. And it is really helpful because sometimes we really need to know that we're not alone, that we're not the only person who has experienced a certain thing, that we're in a community of people that have also experienced things that have been hurtful.
Mm-hmm.
I feel
Yep.
community is just like this big word that's like in my energy right now, that is so so important. We need that. We like to, it's one of those strength things. If we can do it by ourselves, then we're strong, but community, that's strength too. It's a whole different kind of strength to me, and I feel like it's becoming more and more important again in our world.
Yeah, it's very much needed. That's It kind of circles back to what we were talking about with the having too much information and knowing everything that's going on in the world. It's like we know there's people that know more about something that's happening thousands of miles away from them than they are 5 miles away from them.
Yes.
And it's like you hear the term, uh, get your own house in order before you tell someone else how to live and things like that. It's like we really need to get our own communities in order before
Hmm.
we try to do something that's halfway across the planet. And like I said, it's not turning a blind eye to that stuff and ignoring it and pretending like it's not happening. But um, if you can't help the person that just lives down the street from you, or if you literally have, we have people that live in neighborhoods that have no idea, you know, 200 feet away what the person's name is.
Right.
And yet we know, the leader of some extremist group halfway around the world. And it's like, come on, do you really need to have all that information? It's like, think about your community. Who's doing well? Who needs to share their story in that community? Who needs to know that it's okay to meet up once a week if someone needs to talk, and just things like that. Um, yeah, and we've gotten farther away from it than ever. I mean, this stuff I'm talking about with men's work, this isn't new. Like,
Right.
people used to do this 100 years ago all the time. Whether you're talking about indigenous people or just, you can just go back 50 to 100 years ago. Men in communities used to sit down and talk about what was going on in the community. And I'm not saying that they were necessarily opening up and sharing their grief and all that, but maybe they were. Some of them were. And at least, you have, men's groups in churches,
Hmm.
like even places like that. They would meet up once a week or once a month. So, but we've gotten very far away from that in the world of the internet and technology. And gosh, some of the stuff I'm seeing with AI, and how I think I read something the other day that said up to 20% of relationships in the United States by next year will be with artificial intelligence. Like instead of getting out and actually going on a date or meeting new people, people will be in a relationship with AI.
Yeah,
So
that's
yeah,
very disconcerting, isn't it?
that's not very community, but no knocking those people. I do wish that there was ways that we could provide more connection in our own communities to not have to do it that way.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you listen to Greg Braden, but I listen to him a lot, and he talks about the battle for our humanity is what he calls it. And and I do feel like there's a lot of things that happen, especially with like the AI and stuff like that, where we feel like we're just not enough as humans, that we need to be, that we're somehow inherently flawed because we're human. And, you know, I feel like that is why that feeling of not enoughness is why we search out things like AI and things like that, to fill this void that we feel in our souls, that we wouldn't have to have that feeling of it even being there if we would have the community and talk about things and work through our emotions. How do you feel about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're absolutely supposed to be reflections of each other.
Mhm.
When you talk about things are missing or flawed, like, there's we're not supposed to have someone that's exactly like us or likes every single thing about us. And I
Yeah.
think that's the thing with AI is that they're going to be present to your needs 100% of the time if that's the way you program it to be. And we just need to be working on that ourselves of how can we be present with each other more. And you're not going to like everything that the person does. The perfection and the lack of the ups and downs and things, whether it's with yourself or with a partner or whatever, it's life is not supposed to be that easy. Like
Mhm.
there's a purpose here, and it's to work through things like that. And I don't know, like I just it's frustrating to know that we could be headed towards a time where people have no idea how to deal with anything that's uncomfortable
Yeah.
because you're seeking the perfection of an artificial relationship, uh, an artificial job. And it's like, and then if you get thrown into a community or an event where people are disagreeing with you, or you won't, nobody's going to know how to deal with anything
Right.
at a certain point. And it's like that's what we're going to miss out pretty quickly if it starts shifting that way of just being able to deal with anything. Like we already have a high level of nervousness and anxiety in society right now, and it just feels like that going that route's just going to make it even worse.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you 100%. I do. It's awareness, and we can't be present with other people if we don't even know how to be present with ourselves. That's one of the things I would like to point out, because it all starts here. We tend to look to the outside of ourselves for all of the answers and all of the validation and all of that, but it really starts with us. We need to look inside of ourselves and address these issues like what you talked about, that you can even see in your eyes, that are just, for someone who knows where to look, it's exactly going to tell the whole story.
Yeah, yeah, that is, and that's one of the benefits of even though I was already 35 years old when I saw that, I'm like, yeah, that's something I gotta work with. Like it's not something I need to run from, even though I did continue to run from it a few more years with the alcohol. Um, Eventually, though, and I mean, if it's laid out for you like that, it's like, okay, this is a weakness that you have, and this is a good thing. You know about it. Like that's you get people like that. Oh, I don't want to know. It's like you should. Like, how else are you going to overcome it and get stronger if you don't know what's really going on there?
Right. Yeah. Awareness is key. To me, that's the key to everything, because if you're not aware of it, you have no concept of what you even need to address
Yeah.
to begin with. So, yeah. And oh, I had another question for you and it went right out of my brain. Oh, I know we talked about in the very beginning about how you look at everything spiritually. And in our pre-chat, we talked about that you have chickens and you're building this beautiful, I'm going to let you explain it about the herbs because I just think the concept is so beautiful. So if you're comfortable sharing about that, I would love for you to share with the listeners about how you approach things like chickens that seem like something that you wouldn't even approach spiritually.
Yeah, I mean, I think of it as the stewardship, the management, the farming, whatever you want word you want to put with it. It's I think we'd all be better off if we tie it spiritually to Mother Earth and Father God up in the heavens. It's like it's all a part of a cycle, and I don't think there's anything uh, more connecting spiritually than to be a part of your food and knowing where it comes from and how it's raised and go through the whole process yourself. I know not everyone can do that. I know they're not, capable of having a farm and doing this stuff, but being as connected to it as you can is where the spirituality comes into it for me. So, I'm starting at by being on the soil, and I think of the soil is the soul. Like you have to go deep and you have to get in there to understand it. And so there's a connecting with soil and soul for me. Um, Understanding that there is life and death involved in all of it, and that's a big disconnection. I feel like that's current in our society is not understanding that nothing gets to your plate without something having to die.
Right. Even a
It's like
plant. I would just like to
even a
point that
plant.
out.
And it's not, and I'm not just talking about the consciousness within the plant, which is also true.
Mhm.
Um, the fact that there's just no way to get an avocado from Mexico or California to your plate in Montana without something dying
Right.
besides the avocado. And it's like, so as uncomfortable as that sounds, the closer and more connected you can be to it, the more spiritually connected you can be.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I feel like my participation in it, I've been called to it more than ever of just of being a part of the whole process. And I literally give thanks to God for being able to be in the middle of it. And when we first started raising chickens and processing them and things like that, I we 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 have somewhat of a ceremony and we pray before that takes place. And the prayer that I've always put out there and asked is like, if I didn't do it right, please help me to find a better way. And I don't say it exactly like this, but if I'm not supposed to be doing this, let me know that as well.
Right.
And I still feel called to it, and so as long as I feel called to it, I'll keep doing it. There's the whole part of the land of milk and honey that there is a possible way of just drinking raw milk, eating honey, and not killing, and there not being any death involved. So there are those things that I've entertained, I'll say, and tried to think of what the next step would be if I ever feel like I'm not supposed to be doing it this way. Um, and then you mentioned the spiral. So my fiance Natalie is an herbalist, and she's in the process of building a spiral in one of our fields. Right now, it's about 5 or 6 foot high and covers, I don't know, maybe 40 yards, and so it's like half built right now. But the plan there is to have it covered in herbs, medicinal herbs, and allow people to walk through it and see if certain things call them in and if they feel called to certain herbs while they walk through there. And yeah, right now I think that's the biggest connection that we have with the land and connecting it spiritually. But you can connect just about anything, in my opinion, that you do in life spiritually. And if you can't, I think that's a sign that maybe you should evaluate why you're doing it and what is the purpose of it, and if it's really something that you're supposed to be doing. Um, you can think that about a job. You can think about the food you eat, the relationship you're in. If there's no spiritual connection, what is it for?
Yeah. That's a great point for people to consider. It really truly is. And I agree with you that it all needs to be connected and feel aligned for you. Otherwise, what are you doing and where is it going to lead you, in the long run if you're not feeling that you're aligned with that, because I feel like the impact that it has on your life when you're aligned versus when you're not aligned is exponential.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would love to go back to the herbs just real quickly. And could you talk about why she chose a spiral to plant the herbs in that way?
Well, I don't know if I'll be able to fully speak for her on this, but our feelings and my feeling on spiraling is like the website for our collective is called spiralintowellness.com. And so everything that we're going through, all these shifts, everything that we've talked about so far is a spiraling in and a spiraling out. And I feel like that's a constant for just our well-being and the way we go through life. So I've spiraled in and out of control multiple times in my life. And so it's just the aspect of thinking, well, you're spiraling in, let's see what calls out to you, and then you spiral back out. And so it's just a an in and out, the ebb and flow of life. And so yeah, I don't know that I spoke eloquently enough on that, but uh, that's how I feel about it, and I think that's kind of her stance on it as well. Is just the inward work and the way
Yeah,
it comes in and out of us throughout life.
that sounds good. Like I love that idea so much. I love everything you've talked about. It's all so fascinating to me and so beautiful. And I love the incorporation of the herbs into, like, I feel like that's a partnership. You talked about your Amish doctor experience. I can't remember his name now, but um,
Ruben.
Ruben, with your experience with him, where you went into the other room and you were able to get the herbs. So I feel like that's kind of you know, a synchronicity there that's happening with that. So a
Yeah,
synergy. So,
it
and I,
absolutely is. And I've told stories before too about how 20 or so years ago when I was spiraling out of control, I was literally asked by my dad, what are you doing? What are you going to do with your life? Why are you living this way and all this? What is it you really want to do? And long story short, I told him, I said, I know you're going to think this is crazy, but I really just wish I was doing what Ruben's doing. I wish I was practicing iridology. I wish I was growing my own herbs and providing medicine for people. And I never really took to the herbalism to learn a lot about it myself. I mean, I know a little, but I never, sought out the education on that. And so for me to be full circle and meet her and she be an herbalist, and now we're together on the land doing what I was talking about and putting out into the world 20 years ago.
yeah.
Uh, Pretty wild. And, we're both very thankful for where we're at to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I love the way the universe works. Like it just like all these synchronous, I always say you can't out creative spirit, right? All of these things, like you couldn't have made it up, like how it was going to happen, how you were going to meet her and she's into the herbs and now you're
But
doing
yeah,
the iridology and all of this beautiful stuff. It's absolutely amazing.
I'm in the middle of a field in an old Ford truck when I'm saying that over 20 years ago, and now I'm in Washington doing it. So that definitely was not what I was picturing back when I was saying that at all. So yeah, it comes around and it happens, but it's never exactly how you picture it. So,
Yeah. Well, and
but
that's
it's
a very
exactly
important point that it does look different a lot of times. And if we hold on so tightly to one perspective of what we think it should look like, then we don't leave room for it to be even better, you
right.
know?
Yeah, I tell people it's like don't take things lightly when you pray.
Yeah.
Um, it's like we want to give thanks and gratefulness for the things that we have, but when you're being specific on your request to God, think about that. It's like, do you want $1 million? Okay, maybe be very specific about how you get that and what comes with it.
All
It,
right.
it could be a very complicated situation that well, here's all this chaos around me with $1 million. It's like, be a little more specific when you ask for things. And it's like, I'm not, it's not bad that it ended up happening in Washington State, but if I really didn't want that, I might should have been like, but in Kentucky, at the end of it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, calling out the dream is a big deal. I have an actual I journal. I don't know if you journal, but I have a specific journal that's I call it my big dream journal. And it's for my big dream. And I have it laid out every time I think of another idea that goes in there, I put it in there and it's just this detailed, written version of what my big dream is. So I feel like calling that out is really important.
Yeah,
And at the same time, like I said, leaving room for it to be even better.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah. Well, I love this conversation. I love everything you do. Are there any last words of wisdom you'd like to leave with our listeners today?
No, I just want to say I appreciate one thing about you is that you said iridology correct. A lot of people mispronounce it and call it iridology. And so I always like to clear that up that if you're seeking out a good iridologist, one of the first things to note is if they say it correctly. Because if they're not saying it right, they probably aren't practicing it very well either. But you said it right. It's iridology. It's iris analysis, not iris analysis. So in my world, we always appreciate when people say it right. It would have two R's in it if it was iridology.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's like I know we kind of got all over the place, and that's what happens with me because I'm all over the place with the things that I do in the world. So, but no, I want people to learn more about iridology. I'm slow and kind of all over the place when it comes to social media. Um, I'm newly back to Facebook. I was off Facebook for like I think it's 9 or 10 years, and I just got back on there recently and started a new profile. I have my own personal page, but I have Kyle May's Iridology as a page to like on there, and I have a little bit of content on there. I do have plans to try to put a lot of content on there that is just specifically for iridology. If you want to follow all the other chaotic things that I do and share in the world, you can friend me on my personal page. And then I'm also on Instagram as Kyle _ Mays _ and my website is kylemaysiridology.com. It's still kind of a work in progress too. I'm trying to get a lot of information on there. I offer things free. I try to record things and then put them on there that can be beneficial to people. But yeah, there's a lot to talk about within each category of iridology, men's work, sobriety, and I feel like we touched a little bit on all those. So I do appreciate being able to share all the things, even the farming and homesteading stuff. But yeah, each one of those things is probably at least an hour podcast each on their own. And so that's why I'm like, if you can just find me in all these other spaces, you can learn about all the things eventually. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's awesome. Well, I do appreciate you taking time with us today. I feel like your message and what you do is so fascinating and different. Like we don't hear about iridology every day. That's, you're the first person I've ever come across online that does it. So I love that so much because I love to put different things out there that different modalities work for different people. And we're called to different things at different times in our lives. So learning what's out there for us to explore is really important in my opinion. So thank you for doing what you do and for coming on here to talk about it and share that with everyone. So I appreciate you.
yeah, it was a pleasure, and I really appreciate your interest in it as well.
You're very welcome. And thank you everyone for joining us on another episode of Spiritually Speaking. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And Kyle's information will be in the description box below the video. And I will see you on the next one. Until then, I love you all.